Welcome to the Tackling College Sports Podcast, the definitive resource to help you navigate your way to play college-level sports. Here are your hosts, Chris Legates and Mark Franco, where they want you, the TCS Nation, to be your best.
Welcome, TCS Nation, and thanks for tuning in to session number 4 of the Tackling College Sports Podcast. I'm your host, Mark Franco. Alongside me is my co-host, Chris Legates. Today's session, we speak with Pat Haid of Social Media Athlete. Pat helps student athletes out as it relates to their social media accounts. And in today's session, Pat will give us some do's and don'ts as far as it relates to social media. She'll give us some recent negative events that have been in the news with respect to student athletes. She also discusses some up-and-coming social media apps that has Pat a little bit disturbed. And please, you're going to want to wait to the end when an uninvited guest slips past our highly armed and highly trained security guard just to offer their 2 cents. I hope you enjoy it. Pat, welcome. Good morning, and thanks for joining us here on the Tackling College Sports Podcast. I appreciate you coming in and spending some time with us this morning.
Thank you for having me.
Our pleasure. Pat, let's just jump right in. Can you give us a brief description of your background and how you wound up running a business that deals with social media and as it relates to student athletes, if you could?
I can. I worked simultaneously in high school education and marketing tech startups for a long time, which morphed into online education, which morphed into content marketing. And that's a perfect blend of tech and education. It includes a lot of social media. Since we're a sports family, we ended up working with a lot of sports organizations and youth sports companies. About 2 years ago, it became really clear that there was a huge gap in social media education for student athletes, and that gap was really harming their future. So Social Media for the High School Athlete was born, and the books are out, and the online courses will be out at the end of April.
Excellent, excellent. Pat, Chris, go ahead.
Hey, good morning, Pat. And again, thanks again for joining us on Tackling College Sports. I've been involved in the college game now as a coach for almost 23 years. Obviously, in 1992, when I started doing this, there wasn't social media to deal with, especially for athletes at the university level. In your opinion, Pat, what would you say is the biggest mistake that student athletes do make with their social media accounts? And actually, do you think it differs between the female athlete and the male athlete?
Okay, I think there are 2 mistakes that they make. And the first is not realizing you're not talking. When you're having a conversation, vocal tone, body language, facial expressions, all of those things go together to give the person you're talking to clues on what your words actually mean. In social media, there's none of that. Mm-hmm. So what you can say in a conversation and people understand when you say in social media, in text, often becomes threatening or harmful. The second thing is social media is a sharing platform. And what a lot of kids don't recognize is that you're not talking to your 200 friends on social media. You can be talking to 2 million people. Mm-hmm. We just had this happen last week. Now, Social Media for High School Athletes, on our Twitter account, we have about 18,000 followers. But of those followers, many of my followers have millions of followers. So we tweeted out something from a high school athlete, a good something. 2 people picked that up who have a lot of followers, and within 5 minutes, that tweet had been in over 2 million Twitter feeds.
Wow.
So you've got to think of the fact that this is not having a conversation with my friends. This is broadcasting to the world.
And you kind of just gave us a little bit of an example there. Could you provide in some real life examples how some posts have gotten student athletes in trouble?
Oh, so many examples, so little time. Yeah. So let's start with the last couple of weeks. In the last couple of weeks, 3 basketball players were suspended right before their tournament because of a video they uploaded to social media. 2 weeks ago, a Bloomsburg baseball player was removed from his team after he had called Moan Davis a slut in a tweet. 2 years ago, a nationally ranked Don Bosco football player, which had several big programs recruiting him, was dropped from the majority of those schools because of his Twitter feed. Last week, a coach, an NCAA coach in a large lacrosse program, was put on leave after 4 of his players had been suspended because of threats in a group chat. If you look at some of the programs will tweet out when they've dropped somebody because of their social media feed. Penn State's very good at doing that. They won't tell you who. They'll just say we've dropped another person. Duke's good at doing that. Oklahoma's good at doing that. You just need to look at the coaches' feeds and you will see tweet after tweet after post of we dropped another prospect due to social media presence.
Yeah, and I can tell you again, as a college coach now for 23 years, like I mentioned before, and now at the Division III level, we're doing that. My staff and I have in the past looked at Twitter feeds, we've looked at Facebooks, and there have been players that have fallen from hot prospects to very lukewarm prospects because of some of the things we've seen on social media.
In all honesty, there are 2 major companies whose sole business is tracking college athletes, but they also offer a service which is a background social media check, and people, they go back 4 years, and it's very, very cheap. So a lot of the programs are also doing that.
Mark?
Okay, thanks. Pat, can you tell us what should or could parents be doing on our end? I'm a parent of a sophomore at this point. I have 2 younger children as well. What we can be doing to educate our children when it comes to social media?
Okay, so I've raised 4 teenagers, and I'm not sure that coming from parents is going to be the best way to educate them, but the first thing you need to do is talk to them about goals. If your goal is to play in college, then your social media is no longer chatting with friends, it is representing yourself as a brand. Everything you do needs to be looked at in that light. If you understand you're a brand, then the same way you get to practice on time, you do your conditioning, you work on your skills, you know what you can and cannot do on social media. Because if you would not get on TV and say something, you don't say it on social media. So I think as parents, if we can work on this is a goal, this is what you have to do to get to that goal, that's probably the best tact.
And Pat, you just mentioned that there's a provider out there that I believe you said goes back 4 years.
Right.
With that said, when should this kind of education, I mean, it probably should start from on the onset when a child gets a device, but are you suggesting that perhaps middle school or high school would be the perfect time to start to discuss this?
Well, actually, 12 states right now mandate social media training in either elementary school or middle school. And that's great. And it tends to work more with safety, being safe in the digital world. I think that in high school, we do need a lot of education on social media. There is none, almost. So it's getting there. It's going to be a long time. In high school, the majority of education falls to the athletic departments and the individual coaches.
Okay.
Which is not something a coach needs to put on their plate. They have enough. There are no curriculums right now anywhere but in private schools which deal with the nuances of social media, and it is a skill. It's a skill that the kids have to learn. They have to learn what not to say and what to say.
Got it. Next question is, most of these type of social media applications, you have the ability to make your account private. Is that alone safe enough when it comes to that standpoint of the owner of that account?
Okay, there is no such thing as a private account. And I have to back up and say that the providers, Facebook, Twitter, Google, put a lot of money and time into seeing that they will keep your account private. However, I can take a screenshot of something faster than someone can delete it. So once you have put it there, number one, Twitter is archived by the Library of Congress. And number two, even in Snapchat, there are apps which are designed specifically to save snaps. One of those actually was hacked last year, and over 100,000 snaps that people thought were gone were released to the public. So, no, the fact that it's private does not really change a thing.
That seems like a fairly important point, at least hearing that from my side as a parent.
I think the really important thing is, and Florida Atlantic University calls anything you put out on social media a virtual tattoo. You may get rid of it and you may not really see it, but put it under scrutiny and it's going to be there.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah. We've mentioned the word digital footprint sometimes as well with our student athletes at the university. Yeah. Once it's out there, it's always out there.
It's always out there. And for example, every morning we pull 10 do not do and 10 hey, this is good use examples from Twitter feeds, from posts from Instagram. Those athletes have no idea we're pulling those. They have no idea they're in our database. And while we block out names so nobody can track them, I've got them forever.
Pat, we know that most of the social media sites that are out there, the Twitters, the Facebooks, the Instagrams, and you mentioned Snapchat as well. What are some of the other ones now that are becoming popular, and how are we seeing the safety element of that as well?
Well, YouTube is popular. It's a good venue for kids. Vine goes along with Twitter. What is popping up and what is really concerning many of us are the anonymous sites like Yik Yak and Secret and Whisper. Those are very dangerous sites. Very dangerous sites. We're seeing a lot of cyberbullying. We're seeing a lot of threatening behavior. And it's not the intent of those sites to provide a platform for that. I need to say that. But kids want to stay off of anonymous sites. Someone will figure out who you are, and you're setting yourself up for a lot of behavior that is not necessary.
Great advice. When in our pre-interview with you, Pat, we spoke of Michigan and how they employ 2 full-time people just to monitor, is it their football program, I think you said?
they have people who monitor their football program. They also have a lot of software that work. Yeah.
How are universities at all levels, 1, 2, and 3, dealing with this now? Obviously, it's something that 5, 10 years ago we didn't deal with, but now it's so prominent. What are you seeing universities at all levels doing to deal with this?
Okay, so first, by NCAA rules, it's up to the university to have a policy. This tends not to differ from D1, 2, or 3. The athletic departments are taking the brunt of the education, and they are because their people are so visible. We're seeing people employ varsity monitor, companies like that, to track their athletes. We're seeing a lot of talking and education about it. We're seeing background checks. And in a lot of cases, the PR departments and media departments are being brought in more and more. Even with that, you have incidents like the University of Baltimore 2 weeks ago. You have problems, but I think all colleges, universities right now are trying very hard to educate their players so that those problems do not become problems with their fans and problems with their alumni and problems with donations.
Absolutely. And you can see where that would obviously affect a group if there is something that really is socially or politically incorrect, how that can affect donations and what it would do to the alumni base, no doubt.
Well, for high school students who are trying to be recruited, you need to know that once your name is out there as a potential, the alumni and the fans and the people who are very involved in that athletic program are going to check you out. There have been instances where college coaches have not caught social media issues. The alumni have brought them to the coach and said, we checked out this kid and we don't want this person around. It's also an issue of time. One of the things that a coach does not have is time. They have so much they have to worry about. If you become a PR nightmare, you are taking time, resources, and a lot of emotional investment from your coaches. You are not going to be a popular person.
Right. We had CJ Maritola in 2 podcasts ago. He's a Division I hockey coach at Sacred Heart in Connecticut. He said that he has his sports information director and their marketing department speak with their players before the season starts and talk to them about what's expected of them on the social media side. At my former university, we had to handle a situation about a year ago with a player who tweeted out something pretty bad about a staff member, and we had to sort that out as well. But we don't have the resources at the Division III level to have the marketing people come in or somebody oversee our social media, so it is a little bit more of a watchdog from the coaching staff as well.
I think that I think eventually this is going to have to become a self-policing issue by the teams. So in some cases, captains are tasked with kind of keeping an eye on the social media of their teams, same way they're tasked with seeing that certain rules are followed. It's a huge problem in that we don't want kids hurting themselves, the program, and the university if they don't know they're doing that. And we see a lot of that. They don't realize that what they're putting out there is not within the guidelines.
Pat, what are some of the top do's and don'ts that you could share with our listeners? We're dealing with a base that really, from that 14 to 18 range, that are looking to be recruited by colleges as well. And even to those who are in colleges, what are some of the top do's and don'ts you could share?
Okay, so one of the top don'ts is if you won't tell your parents about it, don't put it out on social media. The second thing is find out what is acceptable in the world, because a lot of language, a lot of things that in your group are acceptable, everybody understands, it's not acceptable in the world. It is considered language that is racist, language that is sexist. You've got to know what your audience will consider okay. The second thing is you want a mix of 50% about other people and 50% about you. Every sport is essentially a team sport, even if it's individual events that add up to a team score. So if you want to be recruited, you need to show that you care about the other people involved also. You are not looking at yourself as just me, me, me. The other do is you do want to follow, celebrate, retweet, repost things about the colleges that you're interested in. And I suppose one other thing I've got to say is in high school, guys, this is your coach's call. If they say you do not use social media during the season, you do not use social media during the season. Several coaches have put that rule into effect.
Have there been issues with, obviously, rights of the student athletes and, civil rights of this being able to be, freedom of speech and things of that nature, Pat?
In college, there have been some rumblings. In high school, the majority of high schools, you are not forced to play a sport. It is a choice. And just like you choose to obey the team rules, social media rules are part of the team rules. So we haven't seen that yet. I imagine we will at some point. But if you're choosing to do something to be part of a group, then you're choosing to obey that group's rules.
Can I just jump in?
Sure.
Pat, you just said something that made me think, where a school is not forcing someone to participate in a sport. That may not be true at the private level. And have there been any cases that you're aware of at the private level?
No, most private entities will, if you have to participate in a sport, you can also choose inter-school sports, so they don't force you to be out as a public person.
Got it.
There's nothing that I know of. Again, I imagine we'll see it. I imagine eventually it will be a Supreme Court decision, but I think we're a couple of years away from that. We have had problems at the college, not problems, but some questions on the college level.
Yeah. It certainly seems to me it's just going to be a matter of time.
I think it's going to be a matter of time, but it's also when there are major issues, on the whole, they are so blatantly stupid. You just don't tweet out to the world, for example, this staff member is an idiot. If you were in business, you'd be called on the carpet for that. I think there's going to be a lot of shaking out of what works in the world and what are you doing. In our case, we're most concerned that the kids know that if you do the A, there are going to be these consequences.
Right.
Because I'm not sure they know that at this point.
Do you think there'll be a trend towards more schools simply, eliminating, especially from the student athlete side, just no social media accounts, period?
That, I think, would be a legal issue.
Okay.
I think saying you can, we don't want you tweeting, posting during season is one thing.
Right.
But saying you cannot be out in a social media world when actually that's a skill that they need to develop in this world, I think that might be way over the line.
Yeah, I was thinking more along the lines of during season, in season type of issue.
Some people do that. Some coaches do that now. I'm hoping that does not become a trend, because in high school, one of the things we do want to do is teach, and we want to teach how to use this correctly as they go on in their life.
Sure. Excellent. So, Pat, can you tell our listeners, do you have any upcoming events that you wish to share?
We do. We have 2 free webinars coming up in April. For coaches, we have Aspirin for Your Social Media Headache, which is on April 21st at 8 p.m., and then on April 22nd, we have a webinar for student athletes and their parents, which is 10 Rules to Owning Social Media as a Student Athlete. And that information will all be up on our, my dog is saying enough, will be up on our Facebook page and our blog, and that is socialstudentathletes.com.
Okay. Excellent. Well, since the dog is barking, it's probably time to wrap up session number 4. Pat, we really appreciate you coming in and speaking with us this morning on the Tackling College Sports podcast.
Yeah, thank you, Pat. It was very, very informative.
Oh, thank you so much for having us, and we'll see you on Twitter.
Thanks. And remember, Tackling College Sports fans at TCS Nation, you can get in touch with us on the web at tcsnation.com, email tacklingcollegesports@gmail.com, Facebook at facebook.com/Tackling College Sports, and Twitter at TCS Nation, and on the gram at TCS Nation. And until next time, be your best.
Be your best.
Your college sports future awaits. So join the TCS Nation and be your best.